Hey, welcome to this guide where we will discuss sort of the food infrastructure, a tier list for the food infrastructure, whether it's worth building or not. And I'll break this guide into like a bit of an overview of what food is, why it's useful, and then we'll discuss sort of the kinds of benefits that you can get from food infrastructure, and then we'll look at all of the eras and see if it's worth building each of the infrastructure and under what circumstances it's actually good to build that food infrastructure. Now, food in general basically grows your population, right? And you can use your population to provide any of the other yields in the game. And early on in the game, it's actually really powerful to have population because it'll be hard to get science yields in the early game, for example, because you don't have research quarters unlocked and building quarters without any way of controlling the stability by quarter in your city is quite difficult. Now, each sort of population actually takes food to up. It's like food per turn to sustain that population. So in this one, you can see it costs 52 food to maintain a population of 13. No, a population of, sorry, I'm wrong. A population of around 6, right? When we look at a population of, say, 13, it actually takes 121 food from population. And if you do the maths, it actually scales, like each additional population takes more and more and more and more food to actually maintain. So there isn't a linear relationship between food per turn and population. It's more of an exponential relationship. So now sort of going to, let's look at all of the sort of infrastructure that's available for food. Now, there are different kinds of infrastructure that's actually available. Some infrastructure boosts the food yields that you get from tiles. Others add more farmer slots and improves the amount of food that each farmer slot produces. Others give you sort of a little bit additional yield on the harbor. Others give a percentage-based bonus to the food yields in the city, and some also come with pollution. So let's look at each of these pieces of infrastructure in the various areas and see if they're actually worth building. I usually tend to build the animal barns because of the food per horses, and usually you have sort of 4 or 5 horses, and that can actually be like 3 to 4 population or thereabouts if you have a lot of horses available to you. I tend not to build the farmer's quarter because of stability issues, and I prefer maker's quarters, or I'm busy doing something else, building infrastructure, whatever, other infrastructure, whatever, right? So I tend not to get a lot out of the food per farmer's quarter, but the food per horse is actually quite good, especially if this industry cost isn't that difficult. The fishery is not really that good unless you have like a lot of harbors in the city, which I've never had. Like I've never had like 3 or 4 harbors where this would be a nice little benefit. But harbors in and of themselves are actually pretty good sources of food because they not only work adjacent tiles, they work tiles that are adjacent plus 1 tile further away. So you can get a lot of food from harbors. Now, food on river is quite good, but you have to be careful with this one. If you build a maker's quarter on a river, then you eliminate the food yield on that tile, right? So unless you have a lot of river tiles that either you have nothing on or you have a number of farmers' quarters along a river tile, then this is pretty good. But otherwise, it's probably not really worth building this. Like you might get 6 food per city or center, administrative center, which can be good. Like in a city that has 4 or 5 territories attached to it, it can be like 20 food or something like that, which can get you like a few population. But usually this is only worth it if you actually will take advantage of it. I do tend to build the granary because I tend to need the farmer slot, and I also tend to grow food using farmers. So the +2 food per farmer is quite good because if you have like 4 or 5 farmers, that just building the granary might be 2 additional population that you can then get to do science or industry or something like that. This is pretty good. All right, moving on to the classical era. The artificial reservoirs are very similar to the flood irrigation. So if this is worth it for you, this will also be worth it. Although, this is about almost twice the price of flood irrigation. So artificial reservoirs are not as good as flood irrigation. Grain silos, again, are good because they give you an additional farmer slot and they make your existing farmers better. And at this point, you might have 10 farmers or maybe even 12. So that's quite a lot of population that you can get out of this. Maybe an additional 3 or 4, which can be pretty good. Moving on to the industrial era. This is pretty good because it's just a percentage-based bonus, right? And it also scales with the food that you're producing. So, some of these are sort of flat, whereas this is actually a percentage-based bonus, which is always really good. These industrial silos are good unless you have a lot of farmers' quarters. Because of that pollution on farmers' quarter, you can actually break your city with the industrial silos and get it to be at 0% stability very, very quickly if you have, 10, 15 farmers' quarter in any given city. And the benefits are okay, like the 2 food per farmer can be good, but the additional farmer slot is nice. But it depends on if you have a lot of population actually working on or that are farmers. This whale fishing can be quite big because harbors, theoretically, maybe this gets you an additional 20 food on a harbor. It's rare to have a harbor that's really good because coast doesn't usually extend that far. It depends on sort of the island generation. But yeah, whale fishing can be really good if you have some really good harbors in a particular city. Okay, moving on to the contemporary era. This drone-assisted fertilizer plant is again similar to the fertilizer plant. It's just pretty good. Gives you a percentage-based bonus. So together here you get more than 20% of a bonus because they multiply. The factory farming is again situational. It's kind of okay if you have a lot of farmers' quarter, assuming that you can control the pollution. But that +2 pollution down there is pretty significant and hard to deal with unless you have ways of mitigating it. And then this very, pisciculture. I don't know if that's what it is supposed to be pronounced, but that sounds a bit weird. But anyway, this again is really, really good because of the food on coastal water and the food on lake. I think lakes are underrated. Putting a harbor on a lake can mean that you actually get all of the food on that harbor. So that's pretty good. So pisciculture here is probably pretty strong, assuming that you've been focusing on actually building some harbors. So sort of to sum up, the infrastructure that adds just base yields to tiles can be good if you actually get something from those tiles. It'd be really cool if the game actually sort of pre-told you what kind of benefits you're getting, or you could hover over the thing and it tells you X, because then you can get a little bit of experience more easily. The bonuses on the harbor are really good because the harbor is a really good source of food. Some of these that have pollution on farmers' quarter are kind of difficult to control unless you have a lot of stability surplus in the city or you haven't built a lot of farmers' quarter. And then the food for adjacent farmers' quarter as well as adjacent farmers' quarter can be good if you have built at least a number of them. And finally, the additional farmers and food per farmer can be good, especially if you need the farmers' slots and you have population that's not doing anything. Otherwise, it can be really good. So yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye.